Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, to OnPoint Technologies, PCM, and MacMall webinars Wednesday. We are thrilled to have you with us for today's Microsoft Azure webinar, which is on Microsoft Identity Protection. And to present this topic, we have got Aurat Arbabzadeh, who is Microsoft Solutions Sales Professional. We'll be leading right into our main presentation, but before that, we have got a few housekeeping items. Please remember to enter your question in the question box on your right-hand side, and I will relay those to our speaker at the end of the presentation. We do send out a survey at the end of the webinar. Please fill it out and let us know how we did, as well as topic you'd like to see covered in the future. We are also recording this webinar, which will be available to playback in a few days. Recordings are posted to our webinar page, www.onpoint.com/webinars, and also on www.pcm.com/webinars. You will also find our previous recordings there as well. And with that, we are going to go ahead and get started with our main presentation today. I'm happy to hand it off to our main speaker, Aurat Arbabzadeh, who is Microsoft Solutions Sales Professional. Aurat, whenever you're ready, just take it away.
All right, thank you so much. So there's been a lot of security threats over the past actually few weeks, months, directly relating to identity management. Organizations such as the Democratic National Party got hacked during the Hillary election, where compromised emails were stolen and published. Same thing happened in France, and there's been a recent release of viruses that are going around and pretty much becoming ransomware for organizations. So Microsoft has solutions in place to prevent the identity of an end user in your organization from being compromised. Solutions that are built in, some are built into the Office 365 platform, some are added on feature sets that you can use to protect yourself and protect the end users in your organization from that vulnerability. As you can see here on my screen, I've logged into my Office 365 environment. That allows me to have visibility into the active users in the organization. Now, mind you, this is a trial tenant, so it's not going to be filled with a lot of data, but it allows me to have visibility into what my end users are doing. Now, Microsoft has a few different solutions that I'm going to go through that are just specifically designed to address different types of threats that your end users might be facing. First off, with the Azure Active Directory environment, you do get a lot of the basic feature sets. As you can see on this site, I went through, these are the feature sets that are available on the basic side, which provide very minimal security functionality. Where it comes advanced to your organization to start addressing identity management is by upgrading your plans, your Active Directory plans from your basic Office 365 to a premium version. The premium version you can add as an add-on, purchase it individually, or it's also part of the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, or the EMS suite as we call it. EMS is a bundled package that does include Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1. Now, the benefits of upgrading to Azure Active Directory premium feature sets, one, it enables you to have multi-factor authentication. That is your first line of defense to making sure that the end user is the end user logging into your environment, especially when you're storing sensitive information or end users having access to the organization's intellectual property. This allows you to make sure when the end user is logging in that they're validating against a multi-solution environment. Now, the multi-factor allows you to, or allows the end user, as soon as they type in their password, to either receive a text with a security code, to receive a phone call, and as soon as they answer it, it'll allow them access to this environment, or to validate their identity with an app that you can install on your smartphone that is more of like a revolving code. kind of like those old fobs that banks used or bank managers used to have access to their email or confidential information that had a revolving code. That's the same kind of concept, but it's an app, so there's no actual extra device an end user has to carry. But multi-factor authentication is going to be your first line of defense, especially when you're storing sensitive information in any place, especially on Office 365 with the premium feature set that does allow you to use that kind of solution. Also, the Azure Active Directory Premium gives you in your organization a feature set known as identity protection. Identity protection, as you can see here, we're going to go over here on the identity protection side. It's going to allow you to have visibility into your end users' login patterns and behaviors. Now, this uses Microsoft's machine learning technology that does go through the behavioral pattern of an end user. So it maps out the login styles, behaviors of an end user and locations of an end user, and it will notify you if an end user's out of that pattern as soon as it builds up the pattern sequence. So if I'm logging in from LA, as I would do on a consistent basis, and then it sees me randomly logging in, let's just say, for example, from San Francisco. Well, it's not out of the ordinary. I might be traveling, I might be visiting a client or so, but it's out of my behavioral pattern because it's never seen that before in that site. So it'll throw up a yellow flag notifying IT that I may be traveling. It's not going to do anything, but it's just going to let my identity and the administrators of the Office 365 environment know that this might be something to worry about, but nothing too serious. But if it does see me log in from LA, and then 20 minutes later see me log in from New York, well, that's not physically possible. So with identity protection, it's going to throw up a red flag. You can set up different types of triggers that will give the capability of doing different types of functionality to prevent the identity of the end user being compromised, because it'll throw up a red flag and that'll allow you to set up triggers such as deactivating that account, forcing that end user to revalidate their credentials with a multi-factor authentication, or call in IT to validate that the end user is that end user and that their information's not been compromised. So it does have a lot of advantages in regards to the security side, especially when you're enabling these feature sets in the premium side, to allow your end users still to work, but giving them certain security levels to making sure that your intellectual property remains your intellectual property. On top of that, Microsoft does have security barriers features that are set up in regards to authenticating the end users with an encrypted tunnel, different types of bits that are set up to prevent your identity from being compromised as well. Outside of that, Microsoft's addressing to security threats. Now, most security threats that organizations have, where their environment becomes compromised and data is stolen and held for ransom, in a lot of cases I've seen, is by phishing schemes. Phishing schemes are pretty much designed to trick an end user to believing that they're acting in a legitimate site or going to a legitimate site and entering their credentials in, but it's stealing their credentials to a point where that person taking that can have access to the intellectual properties that might be stored onto the cloud or that end user might have access to. With advanced threat protection for Office 365, this is also, let me go back a little bit, this is all included in the E5 suite, or you can have this added on to any Office 365 email plan. This also uses Microsoft's machine learning technology to scan every hyperlink or attachment that may include a hyperlink in the email that an end user might receive. Now, it detonates that in the server to making sure that it's taking the end user to a legitimate site, validating their credentials. If it finds it that it's not taking it to a legitimate site, it'll still send the email, but it will blur out the hyperlink and it will disable the hyperlink from being clicked on. But if you can always notify IT to release that from the server side. So it's not like it's lost, but it's preventing the end user from accidentally clicking on something that's going to take them to a place where they're not supposed to entering their credentials and their credentials becoming compromised. Now, having a barrier in that way would also allow you to have multi-factor authentication, preventing that end user's identity, if it does get stolen, to not be released without a separate type of functionality of authentication. But the advanced threat protection is a very powerful tool if you guys are dealing with a large set of users in the organization that might be having more threats than you would need to know or you can control. Especially with this solution, you can enable this for your end users so that way phishing schemes aren't affected by somebody in the organization that you might not think that has access to sensitive information, which they probably don't necessarily might, but it does prevent them from having released that credentials in that environment where a hacker can go in and take any little bit of information that might be valued to an organization. A lot of times these phishing schemes are directly addressed to the secretaries or basic customer service person in an organization that it will accidentally click on something and release their credentials for someone else to log in and to pretend to be that person in that environment so they can steal the content that your organization is working on. Now, with advanced threat protection, this is designed for the email side. There is also an advanced threat protection for your devices. And this is also using Microsoft's machine learning technology. This is included in the Windows E5 suite for Windows 10. When your organization has this solution, that your devices become protected against malicious attacks that might be threats to the devices and the data stored onto those devices. Now, with this solution, it provides your devices with, or your PCs with coverage in regards to addressing certain attacks, forced attacks that might be vulnerable to devices from being protected. So this also adds on another layer of security into your intellectual property and managing your intellectual property and the identities of an end user from accidentally being released, especially when sensitive information is also being stored onto those devices. Now, there are other ways of protecting sensitive information as well. Microsoft does have information protection or rights management that is enabled in the EMS suite that allows one, content being stored on Office 365 that is leaving Office 365 to be encrypted if need be. Two, you can extend that encryption policy using an SDK to devices that allow content sitting on devices to be encrypted as well, to making sure that sensitive information, if it sits on a device, can get locked in and revalidated if that sensitive information needs to get accessed, such as if an end user might be storing social security numbers from HR or credit card numbers or any kind of sensitive information, it'll stick with the document. It doesn't necessarily, once it's been encrypted with the information protection on Office 365, it'll attach that encryption to the document, and at that point, it doesn't matter where it resides. I can send that document to anybody outside the organization, and unless I give them the credentials to have access to that document, they won't be able to open that document because it's been protected. It also helps against your information being secured, so nobody can come with a USB stick and just download the documents and walk away with it, or if someone's device gets lost or stolen, it's preventing that kind of information from accidentally being released or hacked into, because it does require the end user to revalidate their credentials using the Azure Active Directory solution to making sure that that end user has proper authentication to access that kind of information. Now, there is a site that does that I use quite frequently, that is Microsoft knows about as well, that monitors hacking threats with identities. And this is to show you how vulnerable organizations are, because a lot of times organizations, they're set up other SaaS solutions using their corporate credentials, and majority of the times might use the same password as they use on their corporate site. And this is just to show you what kind of threats that they have. So this site allows me to go in and type in a corporate email address. Now I'm going to type in one of my old email addresses that I know I use for spam, but it's going to show you that what kind of vulnerability is out there. Now this account has been compromised by a few different sites. As you can see, this site will show you the, what kind of content has been stolen from these sites. As you can see on here, it was the Last FM that was hacked in 2012. My email address, password, username, and website activity was stolen or breached. And there's tons of content and information that might have been stolen because you never knew about it, but your identity has been compromised. And usually organizations, by the time they see a threat, it's usually too late. By statistically speaking, and I hate throwing these numbers around, but organizations find out when their identity or their corporation's been hacked, usually somewhere around 300 days after it's been hacked, after the content's been stolen, after the content has been sent for ransom. That's when they find out, oh, hey, my data has been breached, and they try to address it then. So it's always better to be proactive in this nature, because when you start seeing signs of your organization being vulnerable to an environment where content might be breached, it's usually probably already too late and that data has already been released. So it's always a great idea, one, that I use this site to show the threats that organizations are facing because of the identities that have been released by different sites and different content. But two, providing a topic point of saying, how do we address this? Now, I'm not saying the solutions that I talked about are going to help prevent these sites from information being stolen from these sites, but it does prevent your organization from being vulnerable. On top of this, with Office 365 Azure Active Directory, there is a cloud single sign-on functionality, especially for your end users. Now, the difference between the basic and the premium, the basic only gives you 10 sites corporate-wise. The premium is going to give you unlimited. But what that will do is allow you to set up the password policies, especially for these SaaS-based sites that you guys might be accessing, such as Salesforce, Box, Dropbox. There's over 3,000 different sites that Microsoft is using to revalidate the end user's credentials. But as an end user or as an IT, you would enable the end user's credentials that end users using on Office 365 to be validated against those third-party SaaS applications, which means, one, I don't have to release or give the end user any kind of content information. So it's easier on the end user because I only have to memorize one username and password. Maybe you go through multi-factor authentication when I'm trying to log in, but I don't have to go through that if I need to access the other SaaS-based sites. Two, allows IT to create really complex passwords for those sites, because the end user doesn't have to know it because their credentials on Office 365 is going to revalidate that. And three, if an end user leaves, I don't have to rush in to disable all the services that end user might have access to. With disabling their account in Office 365, I've already denied them access from all those third-party sites that they might be having access to. So those are certain key points as a high-end topic that we can definitely have a follow-up conversation if you guys need to jump in a lot more deeper into this. But I felt like this webinar should be addressed as quickly as possible because of the threats that are going around, and I wanted to make sure that you guys fully understand the solutions Microsoft currently has and has enabled for organizations to take advantage of to prevent your organization from being compromised, content being stolen, and information being released for ransomware. And that's ideally to this topic point that I wanted to address on this today. So unless there is questions, feel free to jump in. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Ored, for a great presentation. We don't have any question in the question box as yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the
we'll
attendees on call, if you still have questions, please enter them in the question box, and I'll relay those to Ored, and then he could answer your questions.
Now, if you guys don't have any questions right away, but would like to address these concerns on a more personal, organizational-wide pattern, feel free to reach out. We can definitely schedule an appointment to go have a more deeper dive conversation about the capabilities that Microsoft has for these threats.
Okay, so looks like there are no questions for the moment. So if you have any questions after the call, please email us at webinars@pcm.com, or you can directly contact Ored as well with your questions, and they will be answered as soon as we get your questions. So with that, thank you so much, Ored, for taking out time again and giving us a brief on the presentation for today and demo. And thank you all for joining in today. Hope to see you next week. Thank you so much, everyone.